Okay, I'm starting time now. Donald Trump is a big fan of the Swedish government. According to The Hill, on September 11, 2020, some crazy Swedish lawmaker decided to nominate Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. So Trump has shown a lot of respect in response to the Swedish government. Maybe enough that he'll start implementing their strategy responding to the coronavirus. CNN writes on September 29, 2020, that Sweden has had a unique response to the coronavirus. They have resisted lockdowns and instituted minimal protections, instead going for what's called herd immunity, where the majority of the population is infected with COVID, so it stops spreading. Politicians believe that herd immunity is maintaining Sweden's economy, but health experts grow increasingly concerned that this could be a dangerous strategy, jeopardizing the lives of the population. The BBC News writes on September 29, 2020, that COVID has killed over 1 million people globally, making it imperative that an appropriate response be implemented to stop losing lives, which is why we must ask today's question. What can countries learn from Sweden's COVID-19 response? The answer is they can learn that Sweden's strategy is a dangerous gamble for 3 reasons. First, their response makes a second wave of cases inevitable. Second, their contact tracing model impairs recovery. And third, their response hurts their economy. The first reason that Sweden's strategy is a dangerous gamble is because their response makes a second wave of cases inevitable. CNN writes on September 29, 2020, that herd immunity is a really dangerous response. And that's because people continue going to work, businesses remain open, and that's why Sweden had one of the highest infections and mortality rates in spring. That number has gone down, but the likelihood is that it will go up in the form of a second wave. That's because the Wall Street Journal writes on August 30th, 2020, that herd immunity is failing. Less than 7% of Sweden's population has actually been infected with COVID. That means that the virus can wreak havoc on the 93% of Swedish people who have not gotten COVID. That's a large source of people for COVID to infect. And that means that a second wave is inevitable because the virus hasn't burned out yet in Sweden. Other countries certainly should not adopt this model, as CNBC writes in September 27, 2020, that in the United States, one of the hardest hit countries, less than 10% of Americans have shown signs of infection. That means if other countries adopt Sweden's response, 90% of the world's population could lose their lives because they'll be infected with a dangerous disease that kills a lot of people that it infects. The second reason we can learn that Sweden's strategy is a dangerous gamble is because their contact tracing model impairs recovery. News.cn writes on August 31st, 2020, that Sweden has a very unique contact tracing model. They rely on individuals to inform people that they've been around that they've tested positive for COVID, instead of having a government response. Now, this can be problematic because people might not inform the people that they've been around that they've had COVID, or they might not know who they've been within 6 feet of. Scientific American writes on September 29, 2020, the better contact tracing model comes from countries like Taiwan and South Korea, who have apps that track when you've been within 6 feet of someone, and have a government administration whose job is dedicated to informing people who've been near someone who's been tested positive for COVID. The Swedish contact tracing model is really problematic because it means that a lot of people in Sweden's population have probably gotten COVID and not known it. And that's dangerous because even asymptomatic people or people with minor symptoms still have potentially lifelong consequences from COVID. It can hurt people's lung capacity. It can have an impact on their heart, and they don't know it. So they don't know that they need to get medical care for these things that they've experienced from the coronavirus. That means people living in Sweden's population will suffer from additional health effects for potentially the rest of their lives. And people in other countries could too if they adopt Sweden's model. The third reason we can learn that Sweden's strategy is a dangerous gamble is because their response hurts the economy. Vox EU writes on September 12, 2020, that the primary reason for Sweden's strategy is they didn't want to hurt their economy. But global supply chains have massive effects on labor markets. That means even neighboring countries who've shut down businesses have had an effect on Sweden's economy, which is why they've had an economic effect that's similar to the global economic effect. So their economy is not doing very well right now, despite their strategy specifically aimed at preserving their economy. The Washington Post writes on September 26, 2020, that Sweden's cases are on the rise, and they're not going to be prepared for the impact on the labor market. Even if the government doesn't mandate a shutdown, when cases are rising, people are going to be too afraid to go to work because they don't want COVID. They might get COVID and not go to work, or go to work and spread it to more people who can't go to work. They might have to take care of a sick relative, etc. In the long run, that means a lot more people get infected who can't go to work, and that means businesses inevitably have to shut down. Unemployment rates get higher when businesses shut down, and the effect on Sweden's economy is worse. They're already suffering an impact comparable to the rest of the world. It will only get worse when their strategy continues to fail. So when returning to today's question, what can countries learn from Sweden's COVID-19 response? The answer is, countries can learn that Sweden's strategy is a dangerous gamble for 3 reasons. First, it makes a second wave of cases inevitable. Second, their contact tracing model impairs recovery. And third, their response hurts their economy. Hopefully Donald Trump doesn't get too on his high horse and think just because some Swedish lawmaker decided that he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, he should follow Sweden's model for the coronavirus. Donald Trump has already done a horrible job, and I could only imagine the impact if he did an even worse job handling COVID.